Welcome to AA Baseball on this Halloween afternoon, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, where we'll be recapping the first two games of the World Series. Coming up next at the top of the hour, I'm Adam Oppenheim alongside Alex Hynes. We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome into AA Baseball on a Halloween night in Bloomington. Let's look at some baseball history from October the 31st. Take you back to 2010 first off in Game 4 of that World Series, in which Madison Bumgarner and Buster Posey were the first rookie battery to start a World Series game since 1947. And those two end up with rings at the end of it. We've seen a few rookies take off this postseason. I'm thinking specifically of Jeremy Pena. He might be a guy we talk about later in the show. We also want to go back the year before. Game 3 of 2009, another timely thing given the recent World Series games. Alex Rodriguez hit a fly ball in Citizens Bank Park, which was the subject of the first instant replay call in World Series history. It was originally ruled a double and then was called a home run. Having gone over the fence, there was one key replay, Adam, we'll talk about later, about a certain IU alum hitting two fly balls very far, just not far enough.
Alex Dickerson?
No, the other one. The other one.
I'm not sure who that is.
Well, we'll get to him later. Let's also get a trivia question in here. As always, it'll be you can respond on Twitter at AA Baseball or at Hynes AS, and we'll reveal the answer to this question later in the show, along with our own guesses on this question. It is, who has the most 4-hit games in postseason history? Again, it's who has the most 4-hit games in postseason history. We will reveal that answer later in our show. Let's start off by talking about the only two games that have gone on since our last episode, and that's the two World Series games. Let's start with just, Adam, what were your first thoughts having watched those two games?
Well, I mean, really starting off with Game 1, it's that the Phillies belong in the World Series, and there's no doubt about it. Doesn't matter if you're the last wild card. Up against, probably the best team in baseball in the regular season, if not for the Dodgers, most would say. But they got down early, 5-0, and mounted a comeback off Justin Verlander, who's struggling in the playoffs. In two of his starts, he's been really quite bad. One against the Mariners and now against the Phillies. 5 innings pitched, giving up 5 earned runs, but especially after, one of their aces, Nola or Wheeler. It was Nola in this one. Got knocked around. They were able to pick him up a little bit. The bullpen did a great job at the back end. They were able to secure that win. Castellanos with a huge catch in the 9th inning. And then Real Muto hit that huge homer in the 10th. It was just, that was a wild game where it was like Astros dominating. Phillies right back into it. No scoring for a long time. Astros had a chance at the end there in the bottom of the 9th. Couldn't get it done. Phillies come up with a big homer, and they needed to grab one on the road, and they did just that. So, they can't really be mad, although they dropped Game 2. It was, it was a valiant effort in Game 1, and a heck of a win.
I mean, as I always say, 5-0 is the most dangerous of leads. It's only happened twice this century, I believe, if I remember correctly, in the World Series that a 5-run lead has been blown. And the only common trend between all of that, at least that I could tell, is Dusty Baker managed the team that gave it up. That was a game, Adam, that you saw 5-0 and you're thinking, okay, this is the Astros series. We might not get more than 4 games. And then the Phillies, I mean, give them some credit. You look up and down their lineup, their top 6 guys all ended with hits, a pair of them from Real Muto, a pair of them from Harper, guys who really stepped up, and that's considering how well the Astros did on the other side. I think you just could see that these two offenses are rightfully there. And, I mean, the two aces, I'm kind of surprised by how they both pitched. Aaron Nola gave up all 5. Verlander gave up, I believe, for the first 5 in that first 9 innings of game that was given up. really just not what you expect from those two guys. I mean, I know Verlander doesn't have the greatest World Series record, but I mean, he's still an ace. He's still likely the Cy Young in the American League. You kind of thought pitching would prevail a little bit, but I guess when you have two offenses that are as dangerous as these two are, it kind of is just what you might be accustomed to seeing, and we'll see what it's like at Citizens Bank Park, and with a different kind of configuration. I think that can sometimes play a little bit more pitcher-friendly depending on the night where you have those Crawford boxes in Houston, where you can get a little bit more hitter-friendly.
Yeah, and for me, I feel like the difference between Verlander, it seems to happen nearly every year, between the regular season and the postseason, is location. In the regular season, he dominates, he commands all of his pitches, he gets those swing and misses outside of the zone, but he makes so many mistakes in the playoffs. And I'm really not sure what it is, because, I would be scared if the Astros are in a situation where they're in, a tied series or a must-win game or a win or go home, and you're pitching Justin Verlander. I'm just not sure. And the other part is Aledmys Diaz, who came in to pinch hit, and I believe it was the 10th inning, who sort of leaned into one pitch, barely missed him, then completely leaned into the other pitch. Alex, did you think that was the right call?
Yeah, I mean, by letter of the law, it is absolutely the right call. It was, you saw you tried to lean into it on the pitch before it,
right?
And he failed. And then the next one, it's about as obvious as you could get. That pitch was maybe a few inches removed from being a strike. I think that was kind of a desperate attempt, really.
No kidding.
Yeah. Now, will say they don't call that the regular season very often. They don't call it at all, really, and they should. I think they should more. It's just that this one was so obvious that they actually did. But for sure, it was the right call, and that like kind of just shows you're desperate and shows that like you're kind of deflated. Don't get me wrong. JT Realmuto hitting solo homer in the top of the 10th inning would be deflating, but you gotta still put up that fight. And at that point, they've got two guys on. It's not like you're, trying to just get at some guy on base. You're in there because we need you to hit. You were a pinch hitter,
but he was bad. He was replacing Trey Mancini, who was, I guess, worse. Both were really bad. So I feel like at that point, he's just trying to get on base some way, because those are the two players who have really struggled to hit consistently throughout the whole playoffs, besides Altuve. But you're not going to take Altuve out of the lineup. That's not going to happen.
Right. Still, though, Kyle Tucker has been a good story. It's funny because I forgot who it was. I think it might have been John Smoltz on the broadcast. Somebody was kind of like highlighting the breakout that he's had, not realizing that Kyle Tucker's been an amazing player for at least the past 2 years before this year, going back to 2020, where he really had his first step forward. And it's like he's now announcing himself on that stage a little bit more. So that's great to see just what Kyle Tucker's been able to do. A guy who I think, would have been a lot of people's potential MVP favorite coming into this if it wasn't for how well Bregman's done and Jordan's early postseason actions.
Yeah, it was quite the interesting game, and I want to touch on one more thing, and it was Maldonado and the whole bat thing in Game 1 where he had a hit an RBI and supposedly used a bat that was illegal after 2010. However, if you used it before then, because it was Albert Pujols' bat, then you were, I forgot the term.
Grandfathered in.
Grandfathered in. I was like, is that really it? It was it. So then you can use it after that. However, it was illegal for him to use it. What do you think of that whole situation?
I think it's such a weird situation. When it comes to Maldonado, it's making a lot out of nothing. He didn't. It really didn't change the game. It's not going to win you a World Series. But the thing that is more interesting to me is that Albert Pujols has used it for 13 years. Having been grandfathered in feels a little bit awkward, especially when you look at the way the rule is described that got put out there. it's not necessarily about some sort of performance enhancing per se by having a bat that allows you to do better, so to speak, which is kind of what is implied is a side effect. The fact that it's a lighter bat with a wider barrel. Sure. But I think, honestly, for me, that wasn't really the reason why they got rid of it. The reason they did was because the kind of maple that was being used for those bats are so shatter prone that it was just a safety thing. So really, honestly, what I took out of this whole debacle was it doesn't have anything to do with Maldonado. It doesn't have anything to do with Pujols, honestly. And more just like, why is MLB letting this bat still be in use when it's a safety precaution? There's a difference between grandfathering something in that you're like, well, we just want to wane people away from it, to prevent it. That's not really what you really want to hear when you're talking about something that's supposed to be for player safety. So it highlights just some really weird, convoluted views by Major League Baseball in creating the rule. But I mean, from the perspective of the game itself, I don't think it had much. I just think it was like the most random time, because what wasn't like the first thing we heard about it from like Ken Rosenthal on the sideline.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, he used an illegal bat yesterday. No big deal, but like, I thought you'd want to know. It's like, I mean, do we need to know this now? It's the World Series. I feel like that's going to ignite things. And like, what?
I really don't think it had, a giant effect on the game. But like you mentioned, why wouldn't they just take it away? Like, what would happen if you just take those bats away? Like, would the players suddenly, hate the MLB? I don't think so. I feel like we have so many rules in Little League now, at least when I used to play with. I'm sure they still have it now with the, certain types of bats you can use. And in the MLB, if you've used it before, you can keep using it. How does that make sense when you're playing at the highest level? And anything fans can latch onto, especially for the Astros. And I'm not an Astros fan by any stretch of the imagination, but anything, that ignites fans, like, I mean, why? It just doesn't make any sense, and it was just like, it just takes away from the fact that, this has been a really good series. But I mean, it was a really fun game one. Then Castellanos with the whole thing, lifting his shirt up to show he didn't have a buzzer or whatever. But that's all I got for game one. It was an interesting one.
Yeah, I think that was a World Series, like, kind of a classic one that you want from a game one, with the exception of the two aces kind of blowing up. but in terms of the back and forth, it was so enjoyable to watch as a World Series game one. I think there are times when a World Series falls flat, and if it's going to fall flat, you cannot have that happen in game one, because that's the first game of interest. The only thing that beats it out is a clincher. So you had to do it right, just in terms of like entertainment value, and that had all of the entertainment. Game two, Astros took that one 5-2. That one was a little bit more of that pitchery kind of game for the most part. I mean, you look at the two pitchers. Zach Wheeler, rough, through 5 innings, gave up 4 earned runs, walked 3 strikeouts. That's the thing that I think surprised me. I mean, this Astros team doesn't strike out as much comparatively to some teams. They also take their walks very well. But against Zach Wheeler, who's a very low walk, high K guy, that was kind of surprising to me. And then you compare him to Framber Valdez. We can get into the whole situation with him. Let's push that back to after we talk about the game. Let's leave the sticky stuff talk to the end of this. But pitched very well. I mean, for a guy who prides himself on his quality starts all year, what do you know? He does it in the World Series. I think that came to the surprise of maybe 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, honestly, it was a terrific start. 6 1/3, giving up those 4 hits. I mean, he was just dominant. And for Wheeler, it was really just the first inning, and the Astros just jumped on him so quick. Altuve, Pena, Alvarez, all with doubles to start, 3 straight doubles, and then Bregman with the big 2-run homer. Alex Bregman, he is just a really tough player to get out. And I think that's a major problem because although the Phillies can hit homers, they don't have that one player who's that like really, really tough out. Harper's like fine, but Bregman, he doesn't strike out. He puts things in play. If you make a mistake, he's going to hammer it. And like we mentioned earlier on left field, it doesn't take, the ball to be hit very hard for it to be gone. But it was all about that first inning. And then with Valdez on the mound, they were feeling pretty comfortable. And then Presley at the back end of that bullpen. He's been really good. He was solid in the regular season, but he's been excellent in the postseason. I don't think he's even given up an earned run this entire postseason.
He's not. So. I mean, that's the thing about this bullpen they've cobbled together, the Astros. I mean, Rafael Montero is a guy who put in an inning and 2/3, which is something he has not done much in his career, going multiple innings. I mean, you look at his career, he had moments of looking like he might be a not bad arm, high strikeout guy especially, low walks earlier in his career. But the ERAs just never really did it for him. And I mean, ERA, I know it's not the reliever criteria you want, because that's just it for small samples, it's pretty bad. But I mean, you could see he had games where he was a little bit rough in Texas, had a pretty rough time in 43 innings in Seattle before getting traded to Houston at the end of the year. Really didn't have enough of a sample in Houston to really quantify anything last year. But he's put in a really good year this year. A career high, well, not a career high in innings. A career high in innings as a reliever. He had 1 year as a starter with the Mets. But, I mean, he's been able to be a guy who's put in high leverage and done very well. Strikes out almost 10 batters per 9 innings. He's really just a good, solid guy, and you think that they've got like 5 or 6 of those guys in there ahead of Presley. It's not just like he's the one. They've got a bunch of guys in that bullpen.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, we thought it was like a clear advantage for the Astros in the bullpen, but the Phillies' bullpen has been good. It's just been their starters who we thought had no chance of really being the main problem. And although their hitting hasn't been like great, but it's been good enough to win. A couple of these games they've had chances. Harper ground into that double play in the 6th. That was a big play. But the other part is the bottom of the lineup for the Phillies. They've hit, like, okay in this postseason. But the Astros' bottom of the lineup is more dangerous, especially when Maldonado's hitting. And for the Phillies to score runs, they're going to need to have a lot of hits at the top of their lineup and or homers. The Astros, they got that this game. They got 3 hits from Altuve. They had Bregman with a home run. Alvarez and Pena with extra base hits. And the Phillies, they had chances. I mean, Harper left 5 on base. And Schwarber had that huge play in, I think it was maybe the 7th inning? If I remember correctly, it might have been the 8th. I believe it was the 8th. It was the 8th, where he hit that ball down the line, and it was called a homer. It was clearly foul. Those fans did a great job, by the way, signaling that. I don't think I've ever seen something that got overturned that was like that obvious that it was foul, which is interesting, because you could actually see it going foul, so it was a good call, and then Schwarber, on the next pitch, he hit one all the way out to right field, which I haven't checked the wooded dong. It would have been out at Yankee Stadium probably, but that was right at the wall, and Tucker was just like, he knew it was there. And the good thing is, the fans didn't get in his way. That would have been a huge play if someone reached over and tipped it. I don't even know what you rule that. There's so many, like...
You ruled that as Steve Bartman.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking that when Gurriel missed that ball at first base. My dad was mentioning that it could be like another one in the 9th when he made that error. But obviously there wasn't something before like that. But still, another really fun game. But for Amber Valdez, I mean, here's the question for the Astros. If you get into like a Game 5 or a Game 6, you get into a must-win, do you put Valdez out there or do you put Verlander out there? However, would you pitch Verlander then in a Game 7 or would you rather have another starter? I don't know if you pitch Verlander the rest of the series. As crazy as that may sound, you want to win baseball games. Do you pitch Justin Verlander? I don't know.
I think Valdez has to be your ace in this series from here on out. Pitch count's going to play a lot into it. The situation's going to play a lot into it. If you're in a Game 6, you can afford to throw Verlander out there in a Game 6 and have Valdez as your safety net, I think. But if you're on the ropes, I think Valdez is your guy. So it's really going to just be how this next 2 games go. they've got tonight. Who is their starter? They have not announced tomorrow's start. Tonight is McCullers. Tomorrow, I would assume heavily that that's going to be Christian Javier. And then I'd assume Game 5, that's when you go back to Verlander and then Valdez. And then you got a guy like Javier McCullers to pitch a Game 7 if that would get to that point. I mean, you've got a deep enough rotation that I think that they can really kind of finagle it however they'd like, really. That's where, again, this is where it gets interesting for the Phillies. The Phillies have not gotten the best starts out of their two best arms. Tonight they're going with Noah Syndergaard, which is not what I would be, something I'd be worried about a little bit. I mean, he had one good outing, I think. I think he's only had one outing so far in the rotation. I think he came out of the bullpen once.
He did. Wasn't that the game that you thought he should have started?
I think so, yeah. But even then, like, in a Game 3, I mean, Ranger Suarez, I feel like he's there. He's shown himself there. It's where it gets a little risky because you got to compete with two guys in Javier and McCullers who are so good that you're going to need a lot out of those two guys the next games, and that's where things get dangerous. I mean, Philly home field advantage is going to be huge. I mean, they haven't lost a game at Citizens Bank this postseason. They've historically been pretty good there, but you got to counteract that great pitching staff of the Astros where, you could go into a Game 5, the final game at home needing to win to stay alive, and that's where you end up having to burn, Nola or Wheeler. Well, you're going to throw them anyway, but like just to get back in the series.
Yeah, well, I think Javier's good, but I'm not so sure about McCullers. I think the Phillies, could be able to hit him. And I mean, they're going to need a hit in these series. But the interesting thing is the last series, of course, it was against the Padres. I will preface with that. But, they split, got the first game in San Diego, took it back home, won the next 3. I mean, that's very unlikely to happen. However, that home crowd, it's going to be advantage. The Astros have played everywhere, but this Phillies team, they're right in it. They're right in it. They just need that they needed that Schwarber home run. That would have been huge because they got the tying run in second when Bohm doubled in the 9th. And everyone could say, well, they wouldn't have scored anyways. You have a different situation when you're going up there just trying to keep the line moving when one swing won't tie it, rather than if I get a pitch, I'm just going to try to hammer as far as I can to tie the game. Yeah.
I mean, and again, to your point there, though, I mean, they're not going to sweep the next 3 games. I think that's pretty safe to say. Just because, I mean, I think that this is such a close series that it's going to be tight. But at the same time, a 1-1 series away from home is, for most teams, the best possible result you could get, unless your 2019 World Series where it was, the way team won every single game. You're not going to go into a place like Houston or a place like Philly and take away, too many games. I mean, so for the Phillies, I think that sets them up in good shape. I just worry a little bit about these next 2. That's where I think they need to be at their best against Houston, because that's where the depth of Houston is going to show. That's where Houston, I think, has the advantage, and a lot of people, I think, will agree that they have that advantage. That doesn't mean that they're going to win, but it means that you have to play to a high enough level that you can counteract it.
Yeah, it's going to be tough because the Phillies, you feel like they really got to win Game 3 because then they're in a hole if they lose that. I mean, it's more obvious when the Astros have like a lot of arms out of the bullpen, because if the Phillies sell out for a game, use all their bullpen pieces, you're pretty much expecting them, Wheeler or Nola, to go 7 innings, which I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen against this Astros lineup. And then on the flip side, like you mentioned, they're facing, McCullers and Javier, and then Valdez again and Verlander. I mean, they're just such a tough team to beat. Last thing I'll say on this, we'll talk about the Valdez, cheating, and air quotations. Obviously, this isn't a video, it's a podcast, but I mean, what'd you think about that, Alex?
I think that, I guess I will say it has a lot. I think it has more merit to it than Eargate. with Joe Musgrove. But at the same time, I really think it's not worth it. It's not something that I'm like, that's huge. I think a lot of people are going to grasp at straws. And I think the one thing that this whole thing has done with the sticky stuff and whatever has led to a bunch of, I don't want to say necessarily distrust, but the idea that you've got so many, with all the camera angles you got, with all the people that can see all these different angles and whatnot, people are going to find things, whether it's real or not. You know what I mean? They're going to find things and think that's cheating and call it out. You know, that's just how it's going to go. I mean, sure, you could see him rubbing his glove a little bit. You could see him rubbing his hand. You could see him rubbing his hand on his leg as he's going up to the umpire.
I mean, it was pretty obvious.
It was pretty obvious he was doing those things. But, I mean, again, the pitchers are creatures of habit. You know, that might just be a comfort thing that, you know, when you do something like that over so many years, I mean, it becomes second nature. And I think that's kind of what Valdez's response was, if I remember his post-game interview correctly. I think it was something along those lines where it was just, that's something I just naturally do. And I think that really that's, you know, I'm not reading too much into it, honestly. I don't, you know, they're supposed to be checking. And at this point, you got to just assume they are. You know, they're not, it's not like they're going to do anything differently between different teams. It's everybody's getting the same treatment. So there are people who will slip through the cracks, sure. And maybe the crackdown is not as good as it was when it was first implemented and they're kind of easing it off. But I mean, again, I just think that people are going to try and make a lot out of it. And I really just don't think it's something that necessarily needs that much attention.
Yeah, but it is interesting, though, like the cameras. It seems like every half inning they go to the pitcher going to the umpire. And, I mean, I wasn't looking that closely, but people have, like you mentioned, all sorts of videos from, like, the stands and stuff. And, I mean, I don't really even know what my opinion is, but I guess, you know, I don't think it's a big deal either. Of course, most Phillies fans would probably say it's a big deal, but, I mean, I don't know what you're going to do at this point, and it's just, like, so tough to throw someone out of a World Series game like that. That'd be absurd.
Yeah, I mean, and credit to the umpiring crew here. There's another part I want to talk about this series. The umpiring has been phenomenal, and that's something, might be one of the rare times you say that, honestly. Maybe they're finally getting to the point where merit actually matters when it comes to umpiring. I don't know, maybe.
Hope so.
Hopefully. But I just think that, you know, people are going to try and make a lot out of it. It's also the Astros. Naturally, people are going to, you know, that is one of the big punishments that, you know, sure, it was a weak punishment they actually got, but that is one of the things. They've got that scarlet letter on them, and they will never get benefit of the doubt again. And you know what? That's fair. That's fair. But I think, you know, it's so hard when you do something like that. There's habit. There is still the, I just need to get a grip on the ball. I'm using whatever is legal to do so, and you have to trust the umpires to get it right. So be it. Speaking of umpires, though, Adam, I wanna give a special shout out to Pat Hoberg, the home plate umpire in Game 2 of this series, who I think most people will agree is one of, if not the best umpires in baseball right now. I mean, he umpired a perfect game on Game 2, the first time that has ever been recorded by umpire scorecards. Not a bad time to do it.
Yeah. First of all, yeah, scorecards on Twitter, so credit to them for doing all this, and you can check out all the, you know, how much it sways it. It's actually ranked on largest changes in run expectancy. A lot of people don't get that. And it's how, you know, the pitch, ball, or strike could change how many runs the team's going to score. But yeah, perfect game. And I mean, it's just incredible to go through an entire game and not mess up once. Like, I honestly can't believe it. When I saw, you know, people tweeting, "Oh, I cannot wait for scorecards to come out," like, because I was like, yeah, did he really miss a call? I didn't see, like, any. There was no comment on that. And the broadcast really about missing calls. I was like, boy, could he have done it?
He's had a few where he's won
yes,
off.
He did it. Plus 0 runs, 100% called ball accuracy, 100% called strike accuracy. 89 called balls were true strikes, or 0 out of 89, I should say, and then 0 out of 40 called strikes were true balls. So that is absurd amount. 129 pitches, all called correctly. I don't really get the consistency thing, 96%. Do you get that?
I don't, unless it's averaged with his overall stats as a season, maybe.
Oh,
He is one of the most consistent umpires there. I think he was in the top 3 in terms of consistency overall. I think Rehak, I don't remember his first name, I think was the best umpire. And there was another guy who I don't remember, which, I mean, maybe for better, you never... If you're an umpire and they don't know your name, that's usually a good sign. Unless you're Pat Hoberg right now or Rehak, who are both very good. But, I mean, hey, you've got Don Larson and you've got Pat Hoberg. 2 perfect games in the World Series. 1 thrown, 1 called. Great. I mean, credit to him. I mean, hey, he should be the home plate umpire for every game. Or make him teach a course or something, Whatever he's doing right, everybody needs to do it.
Yeah, I can't wait till he misses it off the plate by an inch and everyone's like, oh, he missed one. I can't believe this. That would be wild.
Ring out.
Yeah, every fan knows this guy, he was on a streak of like 150 in a row called correctly, and he messed up an inch off the zone.
How dare he?
So after the break, we will be talking about what's going to go on in these next 5 or so games, if necessary. You're listening to AA Baseball. We'll be right back after this break.
Welcome back to AA Baseball. Tonight is supposed to be, that's a key word there, Game 3 of the World Series in Philadelphia. It's in a delay. Right now, the MLB PR account on Twitter just announced that they are going to be reconsidering things in about an hour. They had said that earlier and convened at 5 Eastern Time. They're going to convene at 6:45 now Eastern Time to decide. Forecast is not looking great. 80% chance of rain through past midnight. As one reporter has put it, it's the worst tradition in baseball, having rain in Game 3 of a World Series game in Philadelphia. It'll be the 4th time that's happened. They've had delayed Game 3 starts in Philly in 1993, 2008, and 2009. History not on their side then, but then again, they did win one of those 3 World Series. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep you apprised if there's anything that pops up in the next 20 or so minutes. However, it's looking likely that this game might get pushed back, which would put a little bit of a crimp in the plans of the postseason, as there were no scheduled off days, I don't believe. So we'd have to have a clincher on a Sunday, which MLB has tried to avoid Sundays to try and avoid clashing with football, but it seems as though that's going to be the case. I mean, Adam, they could have done it they could have started the series 3 or 4 days before they did, because they had no baseball from Monday to Thursday of last week, and started the series on the Friday. And now, guess what happens? The elements happen, and now look where you are, MLB.
Yeah, there's always a chance of rain, no matter really what place it is, unless, obviously, you have a roof. But I'm sure that's not a big discussion, right? It's not. No way, right? Someone can argue about roof. I think they do have a scheduled off day. I think it says Thursday. So I think that's why, because it would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, off Thursday, Friday, Saturday. However, it would get pushed back to Sunday, which would be, a problem. But it really should be interesting, this game. If it, I really do hope it gets played tonight with McCullers, who struggled his last start, interestingly enough, against the Yankees. But I mean, they were in desperation at that point. And they hit him well. He did pitch well against the Mariners, though, I will say. So it should be interesting that Syndergaard, has been solid. I think think you mentioned he only pitched one game. But, no, it's going to be tough for the Phillies to, grab another one. You just feel like the Astros at some point, they're just going to take over with their hitting. And the Phillies are going to need some big home runs. Schwarber, Harper, Hoskins. Castellanos has got to find a way to put the ball in play once again.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the pitching matchup, I mean, Lance McCullers, despite his last start, has been an amazing postseason pitcher. I mean, his postseason ERA is under 3. And, I mean, he's coming off of injury this season. Didn't pitch very much in 2022. Only had 47 innings. But, I mean, he's not really showed too many signs of slowing down off of that injury. Syndergaard's, I mean, a similar position. I mean, he took a 1-year prove-it deal with the Angels to start the season. A deal that looked to be a very risky one for LA, and I don't remember who they actually got in return for the Marsh and Syndergaard deal. But even then, like, he's not had a bad year. I think there's still a lot of risk with that, though. They got Mickey Moniak and a minor league player for Syndergaard. Marsh was a separate trade. But it's an interesting pitching matchup. Two guys who have question marks attached to them, but I mean, you'd think McCullers has the advantage, but who knows? I mean, Philly's atmosphere will be a different story.
Yeah, I think it's going to be wild there. And, that's the best thing about the MLB is you sometimes see, the same teams, but you get these different atmospheres, and you just know it's just going to be so electric. And I still think the best moment from the playoffs was that Hoskins bat slam. That was time to remember. Harper, the swing of his life. I mean, man. Already some great memories for the Phillies. They would love to take this one home, obviously. But, the Astros. Altuve had 3 hits last game, and he's been, struggling. Like, who can they get out in this lineup besides, like, Diaz/Mancini? Maybe McCormick, Maldonado if he uses the right bat. I don't know. Is making that up there. But there's not a lot of easy outs in the lineup compared to, like, the Phillies, where I think there's some easier outs, especially if you can get ahead of them, again, to chase pitches outside the zone.
Yeah, I think that's the question with the Phillies. I mean, Brandon Marsh, a guy who's good defensively, to be fair, but he's not really that bad at the bottom half of the lineup. I mean, Edmundo Sosa or Bryson Stott, really not necessarily the ones you want. With the righty, I'd assume Bryson Stott is the guy who would be going to in this one. And yeah, I'm curious on offensively that for the Phillies. I mean, I think the Astros, though, have not necessarily powered their offense in a way that's felt overwhelming. I'd say that both teams are rather even in terms of offensive production, even though the run differential, they lost by 3 of the Phillies in game 2, but hits-wise, both teams have been doing pretty evenly, so it really has felt like a neck-and-neck series, which, I mean, for a 1-1 series, it's felt exactly that. So it'll be interesting. I mean, we could talk about defense as well, even just something that's completely, overlooked. I mean, Nick Castellanos had a nice defensive play to save the game in game 1. I mean,
Pena with the flip to Altuve.
Oh, yeah.
Pena
gets an error for that, and, like, the poor guy. I mean, like, what's he supposed to do? I mean, should he see that Altuve's ducking and chuck it to first? Maybe, but I mean, Altuve, man, what you doing? I mean, I don't know. That was funny. That was hilarious, and they can laugh about it now that they won the game.
Yeah,
but,
no kidding.
I mean, that was very amusing, and I appreciated it. But I mean, even then, like, Bregman and Pena have made some really nice defensive plays just from a, another standpoint where they've made the more difficult look routine. They haven't necessarily made plays that are gonna make your Sports Center top 10, but they've made plays that you say, wow, that was not a bad play. That's a play that I don't know, some random guy at third base is not gonna make. So you have that ball hit to third. Alec Boehm probably doesn't make that same play that Bregman makes, maybe, or whatnot. So I think it's a little bit of an overlooked bit of it, but it's interesting. I feel like these teams are more neck and neck than the paper view might make it look.
Yeah, and that's what, always seems to happen in the postseason for the most part. I mean, the Astros have been, the consistent team. It just shows, how crazy it is when the Dodgers, got knocked out once again this year. When you're just so consistent to be able to make it to the championship series that many consecutive years. And I like the point you brought up about, the runs. And I was going to talk about this last week with the Astros when they faced off against the Yankees. They didn't score a lot of those, first few games. But the second the Yankees got their offense going, the Astros were just, ready to pounce. I don't know what it is, but, they think they have maybe a lead good enough for their pitcher. But they've struggled to tack on runs, and you feel like it's going to hurt them one of these games where, they have a big inning, but then they don't score the rest of the game. I mean, it's definitely good pitching by a lot of these teams, but it's just they wait for the time when they really need a score, like against the Yankees in Game 4. Oh, we actually really need a score. And then Pena hits that 3-run homer, and it's just tied up just like that.
Yeah, I think, honestly, it's funny you mentioned that because that's exactly what happened to the Padres.
Right.
The Padres were a big inning team this whole postseason, and eventually it came back to bite them. They had a big inning, and then guess what happens? You don't bring in Josh Hader, Harper hits a homer, you're done. That's absolutely a big thing, and I think so far both teams, I mean, Game 1, it was a 3-run inning and a 2-run inning for the Astros, then a 2-run inning and a 3-run inning for the Phillies, and boom, we're tied. Neither team scores again until the Real Muto homer in extra innings. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, we can even talk about, the Cubs-Indians, now known as the Guardians, at Game 7, where the Cubs got off to that lead right away, the Fowler homer, and then they scored some in the middle innings, but they couldn't tack on runs, and just like that, Rajai Davis sends one off for Aroldis Chapman.
Rain delay, baby.
The game is tied, and then
yeah.
I mean, rain delays can be great.
Hey,
this one was a historic performance by Mother Nature. I mean, that's a triple double. I mean, wow.
And then this one tonight, it's just delaying the game.
Yeah,
it's not doing anything. The rain's played such a huge factor this whole postseason, and man, who would have suspected that it was going to rain and fall in the East Coast? Really? Man.
It is crazy.
What a surprise, MLB.
So I think we're going to take a short break. We'll come back with wrapping up our show, trivia, and our final thoughts on these next few games of the World Series. So we'll be right back on AA Baseball. Stay with us for the last 10 or so minutes.
Welcome back to AA Baseball. Earlier in our show, we asked our trivia question of the day. It was who has the most 4-hit games in postseason history. We don't have any right-in answers today, so it's between you and me, Adam. I'll let you go first.
I'm going to go with David Ortiz. Don't think it's right, but got to go with the Big Papi.
I was debating between going old school with a mantle or something. I'm going to go a little bit weird. I'm going to say it's going to have a tie to the present, and I'm going to say Jose Altuve. He seems like the kind of guy who just hits, and with how much they've been in the postseason.
I was thinking that.
So, moment of truth. The answer is really interesting. The answer is Albert Pujols. Not a guy I would have expected. I mean, I guess he does hit a lot more than people give him credit for, given that he's hit 700 plus homers. But he's had 3 games of 4 or more hits in the postseason. Wow.
I mean, he crossed my mind, but just crossed and then went all the way away. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Now, of course, he did those with a bat that was just a little bit too wide and too light. Right. So, I mean, do we even count that?
It ties in perfectly. We didn't look at it before, we promise.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's just wrap things up here on this 6th episode of AA Baseball World Series edition on Halloween. Adam, 3 games for sure remain, maybe 5. We'll see how long it goes. Give me your keys to the rest of this series for each team.
I think for the Astros, it's going to be the top of the lineup producing, and I think they're going to be able to do that very consistently. I'm not worried about the bottom of their lineup. I'm not worried about their starting pitching or their bullpen. If their top of the lineup can produce 4 or 5 runs, they're probably going to win most of these ball games. And for the Phillies, it's got to be, if they're going to strike out, 3 times in the game, they got to hit a homer or something like that. Like Castellanos, Schwarber. A lot of them make outs due to the strikeout or double plays, stuff like that, because they're not super fast. They're going to need those home runs, those big hits. So for both teams, it's really, the big hits, but really, I can't really say the key for the Phillies is the bottom of the lineup, because, is that really going to make that much of a difference? They've really scored with the top of the lineup most of this whole postseason. So they're going to need some big hits, and I think that the crowd could help with that. You got to feel a Schwarber one coming. You really do.
He was so close.
Twice.
Yeah, now granted, we've all seen his transformation into a speed demon on the bases. He does have, I believe, still the most stolen bases this postseason, as everybody had expected. He did the Taco Bell steal a taco thing, where he was the first
Doritos Locos Tacos,
where he had the first stolen base of the World Series. I think Ozzie Albies did it. I forgot who else has done it, and Kyle Schwarber. The guy you expect. But yeah, I think those are both really good points for the Phillies. For me, it's their next 2 games pitching. How can Ranger Suarez and Noah Syndergaard do against this Astros team? Can they give good enough innings? These are 2 guys who have pitched well this postseason, but they've done so in limited innings. So I think that's where my question really goes, is how much pressure does that put on their bullpen in these next 2? And by that point, how much pressure then is on the bullpen in a third game if they've been used heavily in these next 2? For the Astros, I think it's pretty simple. Real Muto, Harper, Hoskins. Limit those 3. Can they do that? It's not eliminate the damage. It's limit the damage with those guys. You saw in game 1, Harper had 2 hits. Real Muto had 2 hits, one being the go-ahead homer. Hoskins, I think, had 1 hit in that. He had 1 hit in that game as well. So really, I think for them, it's just all about limiting the middle of the order for the Phillies. So 2 pitching takes for me. Adam, just let's conclude our show. What are you looking forward to though in this series? You talked about kind of what needs to happen for each team and the very rigid, what needs to happen. What are you looking forward to? What gets you excited about the end of this World Series?
I'm thinking about just that next big moment from Bryce Harper. That's what I'm thinking. Is that going to happen? Are we going to get that electric call, that huge swing that just lifts the entire nation of Philadelphia on fire, literally? And it's just wild. Philly's a wild sports town, and even with the Eagles being so good at football, there's so many eyes on the Philadelphia Phillies. And this would just be an unbelievable World Series if they were able to win it. It'd be unbelievable in many different ways. But for the Phillies to go from talking about could the Brewers beat them out for the last wildcard spot to the World Series facing against the Astros, who everyone talks about, best bullpen, best pitching staff, best lineup, best hitters. They draw so many walks, they get so many hits, homers, great defense, great managing. Where's the hole in this team? Well, it's 1-1 right now. It's baseball.
Yeah, what a time to be a Philadelphia sports fan. You've got the Eagles 7-0. You got the Phillies in the World Series. The Philadelphia Union are in the finals of the MLS. The 76ers you don't talk about. What a time to be alive in Philadelphia, huh? For me, the Harper homer, I echo that 100%. Just whoever hits the first homer in Philadelphia, the first World Series homers in Philly since 2009 is going to be electric. And I hope it's Harper just for the sake of getting that full enthusiasm. But, whoever it is, is going to really bring out the excitement of all of Philly, really. So that's something I do look forward to. I look forward to having one more, high-octane ace pitchers duel. We're hoping for those the past 2 games and really didn't get them to its entirety. I want to see a Wheeler versus Framber or a Verlander versus Nola game that goes, 6-7 innings scoreless or 6 innings of 1-run ball. Gets a really good pitchers duel in there. And I mean, overall, just an upset for the Phillies would be amazing. That would be so fun to watch. Even the Astros, if they play like really high quality baseball and just walk the next 3 games or play confidently and win a really hard fought World Series, I think that would be fun too. I mean, it's how it goes. You never know who's gonna win, but I think it's just gonna be fun to see who comes out on top.
You gonna change your MVP pick at all? I forgot you had Framber, right?
I did have Framber. I mean, the series looks like it might go long enough that Framber has a chance. I will say Bregman was my backup pick. I won't necessarily go on the record as saying I got it right if it does happen, but I did have some trust in Breggs. But when the Phillies win it all and Kyle Schwarber wins MVP, you can at me on Twitter all you want.
I mean, that would be wild. An IU player. That is the IU alum.
Schwarber.
Yeah, you've waited this entire show to know that Kyle Schwarber went to IU. Like most people know that at this point. However, if you didn't, you went to IU. So that will wrap up our show on this Halloween day turning into night. And we'll probably see you when the World Series is over. Thinking, unless these games get delayed to Monday. So our next show will be Monday, November 7th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time to 6 p.m. Eastern Time here on WIUX B-Side. So, for my partner, Alex Hynes, I'm Adam Oppenheim. We'll see you next week. Go watch some World Series baseball.